It's already almost Halloween, so today's episode of Nutritional Know-How is on the super scary topic of lipemia. Sometimes also referred to as sludge blood, lipemia is a postprandial, which means after eating, state of blood thickening caused by high fat levels in the circulatory system. Now, most of us are already familiar with the concept of chronically high blood fat levels. We usually call those conditions hyperlipidemia and hypercholesterolemia, and we know that they cause a whole heap of problems. What you might not be aware of is that even in a healthy individual, the blood's composition fluctuates massively throughout each day based on lifestyle factors. Postprandial lipemia is an after-meal state where there's a lot of excess fat in your blood. It makes it thicker, it increases blood pressure, it causes endothelial inflammation, which is the blood vessel walls. It lowers the efficiency with which our cells can extract fuel from and dump waste into the blood. And it's also during this postprandial phase that anyone who's already prone and at risk of a cardiac event or a stroke is likely to actually have one. The fatty blood's damage to the endothelium, that vessel lining, also reduces the coronary artery's ability to vasodilate. So in an exercise condition where your heart rate increases and your vessels attempt to expand, the postprandial lipidemia state prevents it. That raises blood pressure further and reduces sport performance, which we care about here at Running on Plants. Now, we all get momentary lipemia of some sort after meals, but what we want to do is minimise the intensity of the effect and reduce the duration as much as we can. We also want to ensure that our blood can return to a low triglyceride baseline for easy flowing between meals and for, of course, better sport performance. So, freshly terrified of that sludgy, milky blood struggling to get around, you're hopefully wondering what those factors are that we can affect in order to reduce that postprandial lipemia. In today's video, we're going to be going over 4 of those factors. I'm mostly going to be citing this particular paper, which was published in the very appropriately on-topic journal Lipids in Health and Disease. But the information we're covering is very well studied across the literature. Number 1, and this hopefully isn't going to be much of a surprise, it's fat. The more fat you eat in a meal, the more fat you get in your blood. A high-fat meal causes a much more dramatic and longer-lasting lipemia spike than other types of meals, and this can peak as long as 5 hours after ingestion. Not all fats are equal. Saturated fat and cholesterol, such as those from animal products, are much worse than unsaturated fats, such as those from plant products, but they all make a difference. However, this doesn't mean that you have to avoid fats altogether, because the next 3 factors can be used to reduce the effect of any fat that you do end up consuming. And that's good, because I just ate a load of birthday cake. Number 2, fibre. The fibre content of a meal has been demonstrated to influence postprandial lipemia. So, if you're eating whole plant foods and leaves in your meal, the fat it may also contain will be assimilated much slower, spreading our induction into the blood over a much longer time. The body processes a lot of the fat that it does get in, so it lowers the area under the curve as well as reducing the spike. I've always given the advice to my friends of have a salad before you go out to eat, because it buffers the inevitable endothelial damage that you're going to sustain from stuff like deep fried food at a restaurant. All that fibre already sat in your digestive tract is really going to slow down whatever ends up following it. Okay, number 3, polyphenols. These are very powerful antioxidants. They're abundant in many plants, and my favourite source, as you probably can guess, is hibiscus tea. Polyphenols are highly anti-inflammatory, so they can reduce how much of that blood fat is actually irritating the endothelial lining, enabling the vessels to continue having that freedom to dilate, therefore reducing the blood pressure increase. If you're eating a plant-rich diet, which hopefully you are, you'll likely have high levels of polyphenols in your system all day. But if you're planning a higher fat meal for whatever reason, maybe pair it with foods that are high in fibre and polyphenols. Thankfully, they're usually the same food. The studies do show, though, that the minimum effective dose is quite high for polyphenols, so make sure, if you're doing it, don't be shy, pair that Beyond Burger with a big glass of hibiscus tea, which goes surprisingly well, believe it or not. Do, though, just be careful with stuff like red wine. Red wine does contain resveratrol, as you might have heard as a popular buzzword. It's a powerful polyphenol, but the inflammatory effects of alcohol far outweigh the anti-inflammatory effects of the good stuff. So, if you enjoy de-alcoholized red wine, that could be a good idea. And if you just like red wine, because it's enjoyable, that's also fine, but just make sure you're enjoying it for what it is. Don't drink red wine because you think that you're going to get all these polyphenol benefits, because it's not going to help. And finally, number 4, and this is the interesting one, exercise. By exercising either before or after a fatty meal, we can massively reduce the effects of that postprandial lipemia, and it scales with total caloric burn rather than intensity. So, for example, a 3-hour walk is going to be a bit more effective than a 30-minute run. The effective period seems to be quite wide, between about 18 hours before the meal to about 90 minutes after the meal. The sweet spot for effectiveness is also around 1 hour of moderate intensity activity. You think of something like a 5 to 10 kilometre jog, not too fast, but for a more practical intervention, one study showed that 5 minutes of stair climbing every 1 hour throughout a workday almost completely eliminated any of the lipemia spikes from all the meals consumed. That's because the exercise effect is accumulative over that entire 19.5-hour window around each of the meals. So if you live a generally active lifestyle, most of these effects aren't going to be a big deal. But even in a totally healthy and normally active person, avoiding exercise for just a few days will end up negating any of the benefits for high-fat meals that fall outside that 19.5-hour window. So if for whatever reason you do have a sedentary period, you really should make an extra effort to avoid dietary fat and think about adding as much fibre and polyphenols as you can when the powerful effects of exercise aren't possible. I really hope this is useful and or interesting. Please follow and or subscribe to Running on Plants for lots of free fitness, running, nutrition and food content. And I'll see you soon. Thank you so much.